Hello there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Mark Ogden, senior writer for ESPN, and Martin Hardy, Northern sports correspondent for The Times and Sunday Times. Welcome to you both. Let me quickly run you through the back pages. We'll start with The Sun. Their main headline, anger management, referring to what they call Tuchel's grumpy subs. Can they fire England to glory at the World Cup? In The Guardian, two main stories here. The road to number 10 as England rugby team look to make it 10 straight wins on the bounce. Standing in their way, though, on Saturday, the mighty All Blacks. George Ford looking to lead England to victory in that one. And another headline, you can be angry at me. Thomas Tuchel relying on subs to provide the edge at the World Cup. In The Times, the headline goes with how to win down under ahead of the Ashes. You might remember that iconic picture, Graham Swan and the rest of the team dancing in 2010. I think that's called the sprinkler celebration, wasn't it? And two football stories as well. Regulator medal and I'll quit, and Van Dijk header should have stood. Panel rules. You'll remember the controversy continues to fall out from that one after his header for Liverpool was ruled out against Manchester City. More on England football on the back page of the Mirror. Their headline is Tuchel's tune-up for the Cup. Will Thomas Tuchel sing the national anthem at the World Cup? We've had this conversation before, haven't we, when Lee Carsley was in interim charge. More on England in the Star too. Cheerleaders is their headline, along with Eubank. I'll have final slay. Everyone looking ahead to Saturday's rematch with Conor Benn. The Express goes with the rugby as well. Let's noise them up is the headline ahead of that showdown in the Twickenham Stadium. And the Telegraph, how about this? England ready to join greats, as there's more on the Ashes as well. Joe Root and Sir Geoffrey Boycott disagreeing about Bazball. Interesting conversation, that one, I'm sure. OK, Martin, Mark, great to have you with us on Back Pages. Let's start with England football after that professional performance, I think we can say, against Serbia at Wembley. And now the conversation has switched to looking ahead to Albania. The headline here on the back page of The Sun, anger management. Tuchel's grumpy subs can fire glory charge. I suppose what Thomas Tuchel is saying here, that the players might well be angry at him for not being in the starting 11, Mark, but it's how you channel that anger and how you can turn it into a positive for the team.
Yeah, and obviously, that was a positive last night. Jude Bellingham in particular came off the bench and had an impact in the game against Serbia. So I think what Tuchel's trying to say is that, yes, be grumpy with me for dropping you, but when you get onto the pitch, make an impact, and that's what's happened. And I think we have to accept that, people like Jude Bellingham, Phil Foden, they are players with big reputations. Egos in a certain sense, in the sense that they've won big things, they've been big players at their own club, so they will believe they should start for England. They won't accept readily being a substitute, but that is how it's going to be, in the sense that Tuchel has said that he can't accommodate Kane and Foden and Bellingham in the same team. So obviously maybe it's 2 out of 3 he'll have to play, so the player that doesn't play will have to accept it and deal with it. So I think what Tuchel's done is, certainly the last month or so, he seems to have asserted his authority on the England squad more than they had in his first year. I think he's realised what he wants. He's realised that he's the guy in charge. And I think he's made some big decisions. He's made some big calls. That certainly dropping Jude Bellingham for the last squad was a real statement of intent. And I think he's now saying these things from a position of strength. And he's right. He's right to say that we can't play all our best players just because we have to play our best players. I think England in the past have found, the downside from that, the Lampard-Gerrard situation in the past. We've had too many players for one position. Now, Tuchel's being pragmatic about it, saying, look, we've got some great players, but only one can play in that position. You're going to have to deal with it. And he's kind of, I won't say it's tough love management, but it's just being honest. It's honest management, saying that you're not all going to play every week. So when you do play, when you get on the pitch, make an impact. And if you make an impact, you might play in the next game.
Yeah, and this covered in the Guardian as well, where the headline is, you can be angry at me, Tuchel relying on subs to provide edge at World Cup. And just some of his quotes, Martin, quite interesting from Tuchel, because he keeps referring to this team camaraderie that he wants to see with England. He refers to it as a brotherhood, and he said, you can be angry at the coach, you can be angry at the situation, but if you see the nations that win, you see the clubs that win the Champions League, then the bench is on their feet from the last 8 to 10 minutes. There is no one sat there thinking, I should be on the field. Why am I not there? He's got a point about this, hasn't he? It's a team effort, whether you start or whether you start on the bench.
Yeah, I'm increasingly impressed with what he says and how he's brought this unity in terms of what he's doing with the team on the pitch, but also what he's doing with the squad. Can't deny in the last 10 years, football has changed in terms of physicality. You have more substitutes now. In the piece you're referencing there, he does also talk about the fact that it's going to be 40 degrees in terms of the heat in the World Cup finals. You're going to need those players to be ready. And one of the big things Pep Guardiola has spoken about the last 5 or 6 years is you cannot have one single player sulking in the background, sitting on the bench, unhappy with life and grumbling and dragging everybody else down. I think that is a reiteration of this here from Thomas Tuchel in terms of every single person. And he has, as Mark said there, he's reasserted his authority here. That's his team. He's got Jude Bellingham on the bench and he's got Phil Foden on the bench. And the suggestion would be that if Cole Palmer gets fit and he's in his squad for the World Cup, he might also be on the bench. It's up to those 3 players to react to that situation and feel they can impact their game in a different situation to the way they would like to. We'll have to see how they do that. Jude Bellingham came on and did well last night. I don't get the impression he's particularly happy with being a substitute, which again, from the comments Tuchel is making, is what he wants. But it's how you react to that as a player for England, and therefore, do you come on? Do you help play a part in the second goal, as both him and Phil Foden did? What has been clear here is this is Thomas Tuchel's England, and he's not taking any grief from anybody. He will pick the team he wants. He will tell the squad to do what they are told, his tactics, his way. It's been very, very interesting to see how much he's grown into that job in what we're getting on for is a year now. And the fact that now there is this build-up of confidence and belief that it's going to be his way. So it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. I'm still intrigued by how a Foden or a Bellingham or a Palmer would react to being on the bench at the World Cup finals. But there'll be twists and turns in his starting 11 before and during that tournament.
Yeah, Mark, how will they react? Because these are big-name players, they're high-profile, they're used to starting games, and above all, they're both playing very well for some of the best teams in the world. Real Madrid are one of the most dominant forces in world football, and Jude Bellingham is leading the way there. You look at Phil Foden at the moment and his recent revival at Manchester City. How would those personalities react to starting a World Cup match on the bench, particularly in the latter stages of a tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing to say is they're both different personalities. I think Jude Bellingham's a much more expressive personality than Phil Foden. I think they'd take it in different ways, but neither would like it. Neither would want to be on the bench. They'd want to be, front and centre of things. But I think, towards the end of Gareth Southgate's reign in charge, I think 1 or 2 players maybe pushed the button a little bit, but maybe tried to take it a little bit too far in terms of, asserting their own authority. And I think Southgate was great at the outset in 2018 when he was this guy that took over a young squad and they all looked up to him. But I think towards the end it was a little bit different. But I think now Tuchel he's got that authority which I think Southgate had lost towards the end. And I think the big players that will not take liberties with Thomas Tuchel, which they may have done towards the end of Gareth Southgate. I mean, I was in Berlin for the final. And I saw the way that Jude Bellingham reacted to Southgate during the game. He kind of gave him a dressing down. It was almost like Bellingham was talking to an apprentice rather than his manager. So I don't think that's going to happen with Tuchel. If it does happen with Tuchel, he'll probably get taken off straight away. So I think Tuchel is almost like a strongman manager. He's a guy that's won Champions Leagues, he's won titles, he's won big titles. I think the players respect that. I think the players also fear it as well. They fear the fact that this guy will make his own big decisions because, we're talking about egos. He's probably got the biggest ego of them all, Thomas Tuchel, in a good way. And that means he can handle these players. So I think, yes, they won't like it when they're on the bench, in a World Cup quarter-final, semi-final, even a final, if England get that far. But he's the boss, and I think he's made that clear. And I think when you have a manager who's won things and has got a big reputation, it means he can handle the big players a little bit more than maybe a Gareth Southgate towards the end.
OK, sticking with England and to a familiar debate that it seems that we're used to having with this England side in recent months. Tuchel's tune-up for the Cup is the headline in the Mirror. England's German gaffer says he could sing God Save the King next summer. Martin, yeah. How much should we care about this? That's my opening question.
All right, for a bit of context, Newcastle United won the first trophy, major domestic trophy in 70 years last season. And not once was Eddie Howe asked to recite the words of the full entirety of the Bladen races. And nobody cares if he could do that. This seems a bit of a theme that we keep going back to. Does it make any difference? No, I don't think it does. It's about, can these players play well for England and do well in a major tournament? Can he bring the knowledge and the experience and the ability of, as Mark said, of leading a team to win the Champions League into a World Cup? The other bits and pieces are just the noise that seems to have surrounded England for decades. That, certainly from my perspective, does not feel particularly important. What I was far more interested in was the reaction when he had qualified with this England team for a World Cup final in an away dressing room in a tiny stadium with a running track round the side. Nobody was more enthused in the video that we saw than him at the excitement and the prospect of leading a team into a World Cup final. And for that team to be England, he seemed absolutely delighted. He's done his job so well. I don't care if he can recite the national anthem in its entirety before a game of football. It's what he does in terms of picking the team, how it evolves during the tournament, the substitutions, the tactics, all those things are what matter and what I find of interest.
Do you care, Mark?
Not really, no. Doesn't matter to me. But listen, I appreciate it matters to some people. It doesn't matter to me. Some of the players don't sing the national anthem. Some of the fans don't sing it. Some of the fans sing it very passionately. It's a big deal for them. So, each to their own. If Thomas Tuchel wants to sing it, fine. If he doesn't want to sing it, no big deal. Because, why should he? First of all, he's not British, but if he wants to sing it, fine. But listen, it's all personal choice and personal opinion, but it doesn't make any difference. It won't make the slightest bit of difference as to whether England win the World Cup or not if Thomas Tuchel sings the national anthem or not.
Yeah, well, he says he is considering it. He said he had to earn the right to sing it. We'll wait to see whether he does or not. OK, we're going to take a quick break. Thank you, Mark and Martin, for the moment. We're going to be looking at more of the back pages after this break, including this one from The Times. And it comes from Martin Hardy. Van Dijk header should have stood. Panel rules. The controversy continues. Stay with us. You're watching Backpages tonight. Welcome back to Mark Ogden, senior writer for ESPN, and Martin Hardy, Northern sports correspondent for The Times and The Sunday Times. And that's where I want to start on this second part, Martin, is with your newspaper, because we're talking about Liverpool against Manchester City. The fallout continues after Virgil van Dijk's header was ruled out against City. It would have made the scores 1-1. As we know, City went on to win that game 3-0. So the header should have stood, Martin, but at the same time, it says that VAR was right not to overturn the on-pitch decision to rule it out. How does that one work then?
The first thing to say about this, it was such a contentious moment in the game that we could probably argue for the next 24 hours about this and not everybody would agree. Liverpool fans would say the goal should have stood. Manchester City fans would say the goal shouldn't have stood. And everybody in a pub would probably argue and argue and argue. And both sides would have credibility in terms of whether the player moved, whether it impacted Donnarumma's line of vision. The Premier League's key match incident panel, which is a level of scrutiny on big decisions, which has a panel of 5 people on it, which is 3 former coaches or players who are independent, 1 person from the Premier League and 1 person from the PGMOL sit and review these key decisions. And they ruled, I think it was quite a tight decision, that the goal should have stood and that decision was wrong. But I think what a lot of people miss, and probably what frustrates PGMOL, is that there is a procedure here. If VAR can be used to overturn a subjective decision if a clear and obvious error has been made, but it's highly unlikely that it will be used to overturn an offside call such as this, which has come from Kavanagh and Burt on the pitch. So all that VAR gets asked is, was it offside? Yes. Was there a movement from Robertson? Yes. That's all VAR can do in this situation. So that I think sometimes the clear and obvious errors are from people who don't quite understand what can be done in a key moment of that. Highly, highly unlikely in that situation, when those 2 elements get a tick, that there would then be an instruction from VAR to say, can you go and have another look at your decision for offside or for the movement of Robertson, or whether it affected Donnarumma. It's incredibly close, but what we see is it is a crucial moment in the game. No matter how badly Liverpool were playing, if we were all going to go home at half-time because one team were dominant, most second halves wouldn't take place. The game could have spun on that moment. It may have given Mo Salah, who took the corner, a new lease of life. Hugo Ekitike Sunday may have come to life as well. But at the same time, it was a very, very tight call. What we are seeing, that narrowly the goal should have stood, which could have impacted. But the procedure from VAR was actually correct at the time. The PGMOL, I think, have a very difficult time. But my conversations with them over the last couple of days is whether or not you wanted VAR or didn't. Around 91% of decisions were correct in the Premier League before VAR. Now it's about 96%. So there's not that many big moments. It's just that we have a level of hysteria around the game, which is probably unprecedented. And in a massive, massive game and a massive, massive moment like this is something we can correctly talk about, especially when something like the KMI judge it to have been a mistake.
Yeah, not many moments, but when they're as big as that one between 2 rivals going for the title, you can understand why the Liverpool fans are really frustrated with this one, Mark, particularly when the outcome is, well, yeah, the header should have stood.
Yeah, I agree that the header should have stood, but you can't pick and choose which incidents to intervene in. And I guess we had one a couple of weeks ago when Sean Dyche was upset about the goal that Man United scored against Forest, where the ball didn't go out of play, but it was given as a corner. And I think IFAB are talking about potentially looking at reviewing yellow cards or second yellow cards. I mean, where does it stop? I think fans, they don't like VAR when it goes against them, but they love VAR when it saves them. I think we have to draw the line somewhere. And yes, it was the wrong decision, but you can't re-referee every decision, otherwise the game would never end. So there's always going to be one side of the line and another side of the line in terms of which decision do you do. But I think in this instance, it's frustrating for Liverpool that the decision was wrong. But like I say, you can't just, because it's a big game, because it's potentially a title decider. I know Arsenal are running away with the league right now, but you can't just say, well, it's a big game. Let's look at every decision. You have to treat every game the same. And I think in this situation is that the more that VAR intervenes, the longer the games will be, and the more frustrating it'll be for the fans. So unfortunately, it's going to have to stand.
OK, let's stick with football, but move on to the Times, where Martin Samuel has been speaking to the new independent football regulator, David Cogan. And now this is interesting because this is the first kind of interview he's done since he got into the role. And he says, quite defensively, I suppose, after questions were raised about whether he might be influenced after finding out that he had been a Labour Party donor, he says he will quit his role if there's any interference from politicians whatsoever as he tries to do his job, Martin. How much confidence do you have in that?
It's a really good interview by my colleague Martin Samuel, and really worth a read. Martin has been fairly cynical of whether an independent football regulator would have teeth. He seems that David Cogan comes across in the piece as very front foot and opinionated and a strong character, and Martin seems to warm to him. That news story element of the piece is that he said, if you read that through, he will quit if there is any political influence whatsoever. He deals with the matter you've spoken about in terms of Lisa Daddy. But what's interesting is that he was also on the shortlist from the Conservative government to have this position before Labour came to power. So he seems to have been somebody that's been in line for this position for quite a while. Doesn't seem to be dressing stuff up. He said the entire pyramid has to be looked at. Funny enough, the clubs that he goes on to say that he worries about are the ones perhaps that have benefactors or businessmen who continually pump in their money to keep the club afloat. And he does mention Crew. But he also talks about his first couple of days in office when he's met a lot of people from, I think must have come from government departments, sits them all down, says they're in the 30s and says, have any of you ever spoke to a chief executive, an accountant, a manager, or anybody involved in a football club at any level? And pretty much everybody said they hadn't. And I think he then said, you've got 3 months to go and speak to 3 people at that level if you want to keep your jobs. And by 2.5 months later, everybody had. The good sign, I think, from that is that will give this department a much, much better feel about the complexity of football clubs and just how difficult it is to run them and finance them.
Yeah, the quotes are really quite substantial, Mark. Just reading them through here, where he says, I am way too difficult. I've already been way too independent and difficult for their taste. He says, if there's any political interference, I will resign. I will resign before I'm ever put in that position. He sounds as though he's here to change things. He's not just here to make up the numbers, as it were.
Yeah, it sounds like he's up for a fight, and that it also sounds like he could be talking himself out of a job because obviously he has to work with people above him and below him and either side of him as well. So the regulator's job is an interesting one. You know, the football world is kind of divided as to whether it'll be a good thing or not. I think, taking away the politics, I think the acid test will be how the regulator deals with the Sheffield Wednesday situation right now. Sheffield Wednesday got into administration, lots of potential buyers there, big, successful, historic club in a bit of a mess right now. Can the regulator help that club survive and prosper? We'll wait and see. So let's take away all the political noise and let's see how it deals with a big football situation. And right now, that situation hasn't been resolved. So that is the first acid test for me as to whether the regulator has got any teeth or if it will be a success.
And staying with you, Mark, because I know you've been following Italy over the last few months, and you've written recently on ESPN about their, quite surprisingly poor World Cup qualifying campaign. The headline on ESPN, Gattuso wants rule change as Italy's World Cup bid falters. What's going on here then? And what has happened to this Italian national team?
Yeah, well, I was in Moldova last night watching Italy play, and the basically situation in Italy is that they've won 6 of 7 qualifying games. So they've had a good campaign, but because they lost to Norway in the first game, they need to beat Norway by 9 goals on Sunday in the San Siro to qualify. Otherwise, they'll end up in the playoffs again. So they've missed out on the last 2 World Cups. Italy, 4-time world champions, missed out on 2018, 2022. On both occasions, they lost in the playoffs. So Gattuso's point is that, look, it's unfair that although Europe gets 16 places, South America gets 7 out of 10 potential nations that could qualify. There's many more teams from Africa now. So Gattuso's point is that they should change the situation. A nation like Italy shouldn't get qualification on the basis of what they've done in the past. But if you win 6 of 7 qualifiers, you should have a good chance of qualifying. So he thinks it's unfair that teams with a good record, such as Italy, will end up in the playoffs and potentially meet Sweden or North Macedonia, who knocked them out last time, and miss out. I mean, listen, Italy is a nation that belongs at a World Cup. There's so many great memories of Italy, Italian successes, great players. But if they miss out for a third successive time, it would seem a bit odd that, have all these, nations that are experiencing the World Cup for the first time, quite rightly, but a superpower like Italy misses out because of the way that the qualification programme is structured. So Tuchel wants it to change. Not sure it will, but it'll be interesting to see if Italy miss out again, because that will be a massive blow. No Italy at a World Cup since 2014. That's a lot. That's a lot of World Cups to miss out on.
Yeah, it really is. Almost unbelievable for a team of that prowess. OK, we're shortly coming to time. Let's just look at the back of the Daily Telegraph for the build-up to England against New Zealand. And Martin, England ready to join greats, they say. They're looking for a 10th win in the row, but it's the mighty All Blacks. How do you rate this one? You've got about 30 seconds.
From listening to the players and the coach, they are fully aware of the historical significance of this match. The one beauty and the mystique of Test match rugby is that you win these tests. It's like winning a World Cup. It'll be remembered forever. Home soil victories against New Zealand, I think it's 36, 83, 93, 2002 and 2012. It's their chance to create history. How they finish the game, which they are well aware of, and how strong their substitutions are, will be the key to perhaps doing that.
Martin Hardy, Mark Ogden, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Back Pages. Coming next here on Sky Sports News, we're looking at the new Celtic manager, news of the latest developments. Coming right up. Stay with us.